Think about the last argument you had. You showed them facts, you explained calmly, you even gave them an easy way out, and still, they doubled down. No pause, no reflection, no maybe, just deflection, excuses, or silence. And at some point, you stopped arguing, not because you lost, but because you realized something terrifying. This person is incapable of admitting they're wrong. Here's the part most people don't understand. People who never admit they're wrong aren't confident. They're not strong, and they're not stupid. They're protecting something fragile. And psychology explains exactly what that is. Why being wrong feels like death to some minds. For most people, being wrong is uncomfortable. For some people, it's catastrophic. Psychologists call this ego threat. Their sense of self is tightly bound to being competent, intelligent, or morally right. So when they're wrong, it's not just a mistake. It feels like an attack on their identity. Admitting error would mean admitting they are flawed, and their brain treats that like danger. So instead of updating beliefs, the mind does what it does best under threat. It defends. When someone who sees themselves as right is proven wrong, it creates cognitive dissonance. That's the psychological tension between, I'm a smart, good person, I just made a clear mistake. That tension is deeply uncomfortable, so the brain resolves it the fastest way possible. Not by changing beliefs, but by changing the story. They rationalize, they shift blame, they attack the source, they move the goalposts. Not because they're lying on purpose, but because their mind is trying to restore internal balance. Truth becomes secondary to emotional survival. Many people who never admit they're wrong learned this behavior early. Maybe they grew up in environments where mistakes were punished, being wrong meant humiliation, vulnerability was unsafe. So they adapted. They learned that admitting fault equals loss of power. Over time, being right became armor. Psychologists refer to this as defensive self-esteem. It looks confident on the surface, but underneath, it's incredibly brittle. That's why even small corrections trigger big reactions. Here's what rarely gets said out loud. At the core of chronic defensiveness is shame. Shame isn't, I did something wrong. Shame is, I am something wrong. People who carry unresolved shame avoid self-examination at all costs. Admitting error would open the door to feelings they've spent years suppressing. So they avoid that door entirely, even if it costs them relationships, even if it costs them growth. This is the hardest part for people dealing with them. You think facts will help. They won't. Because this isn't a logic problem. It's an emotional regulation problem. When someone's nervous system goes into defense mode, the rational brain shuts down. Correction feels like threat. Feedback feels like attack. Disagreement feels like disrespect. So they fight not to be right, but to feel safe. Now let's clear something up. Not everyone who can't admit they're wrong is narcissistic, but rigid defensiveness exists on the same spectrum. Clinical psychology shows that narcissistic traits often involve extreme sensitivity to criticism, grandiose self-image masking insecurity, zero tolerance for fault. But many non-narcissistic people display similar patterns when their identity is threatened. The difference? Some people defend to protect their ego. Others defend because they never learned how to be wrong safely. Change requires self-reflection. Self-reflection requires tolerating discomfort. People who never admit they're wrong avoid discomfort like fire. So instead of evolving, they repeat patterns. Same arguments, same conflicts, same outcomes, and they blame everyone else. Because acknowledging their role would crack the identity they've built their life on. Here's the tragedy. People who can't admit they're wrong don't win. They stagnate. They stop learning. They lose trust. They push away honest relationships. Over time, people stop telling them the truth. Not because the truth disappeared, but because no one wants to fight a wall. Now pause, because this isn't just about them. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you admitted you were wrong without defending yourself? Did your body tense up reading that? That reaction tells you everything. Admitting you're wrong isn't weakness. It's emotional maturity. It means your identity is strong enough to survive correction. People who grow aren't the ones who are always right. They're the ones who can say, "I didn't know. I messed up. You're right," and keep their self-worth intact. So now I want to hear from you. Have you dealt with someone who never admits they're wrong? Or did this video hit closer to home than you expected? Comment below. And if you want psychology that doesn't sugarcoat, doesn't flatter, but actually explains behavior, subscribe. The next video goes even deeper, and you won't want to miss it.